Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the semifinal round of the 9th World Schools Debate Championship. The motion for today's debate is, "This House supports affirmative action." The teams debating this are Singapore, who will be proposing, and England, who will be opposing. Speaking for the proposition are as follows. First speaker, Aaron Maniam. Second speaker, Selena Chua. Third speaker, Vernie Olivero. And the reply will be done by Selena Chua. Please welcome them. Speaking for the opposition are first speaker, Vicky Perkins. Second speaker, Michael Bersham. Third speaker, James Williams. And the reply will be done by Vicky Perkins. Please welcome them. We have 7 judges for today's debate, and they are as follows. Mrs. Singh from Malaysia, Pat Slavin from Scotland, Sebastian Percival from Argentina, Elizabeth Virgo from Bermuda, Joe Scottney from Australia, Ali Ashan from Pakistan, and Richard Sadako from the United States. Please welcome them. And timing the debate today is Michael Pearman. Let's welcome him. The times for the debate, for main speeches in this debate, will be announced as follows. There'll be 1 bell at 1 minute, 1 bell at 7 minutes, and 2 bells at 8 minutes. The first and last minute of each speech is protected from points of information. For the reply speeches, bells will be 1 bell at 3 minutes, 2 bells at 4 minutes. No points of information are permitted in the reply speeches. As world rules allow, points of information, no interjections will be permitted between the teams or from the audience. Any points of order will be ruled upon by the judges. Between the main speeches and the reply speeches, there will be a short gap for the judges to write their notes, and then the reply speeches will be given. Without further ado, I call upon Aaron Maniam from Singapore to open the debate.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members of the House, today we're gathered here to debate on whether or not we would support affirmative action. Now, before we proceed, it is necessary for us to clarify the terms that are being used in today's motion. To support, ladies and gentlemen, involves endorsing something. It involves advocating something. And now the more important of the terms in the resolution today is that of affirmative action, and that requires some explanation. Affirmative action is a deliberate policy, ladies and gentlemen, of giving preferential treatment to certain groups in society on the grounds that they have been disadvantaged either by governmental policies or as a result of popular prejudice. Now, ladies and gentlemen, it is not an arbitrary thing, the concept of affirmative action. It is a concept and a principle that is practiced in tandem with the requirements of a society and of the world in which it takes place. Now, what we're here to debate today is the principle of having affirmative action. Not, ladies and gentlemen, any specifics of it, but the principle of the matter. We are taking into consideration the context of the groups, ladies and gentlemen, who are being disadvantaged. And we're here to discuss the concept and the principle of affirmative action. Now, the case of the proposition today is a simple one, ladies and gentlemen. Because affirmative action is effective and it is beneficial, this House would support it. As first speaker of the proposition, I will go on to show... No, thank you, madam. I will go on to show how affirmative action is effective in alleviating the problem of discrimination in terms of those who are disadvantaged, ladies and gentlemen. No, thank you, sir. My second speaker will go on to show how the principle and concept of having affirmative action brings long-term benefits to society as a whole. Yes, madam.
How can something which works against the principle of meritocracy bring benefits?
Ah, ladies and gentlemen, they assume that it works against the principle of meritocracy. But as we've already set out in our definition, affirmative action is giving preferential treatment to a group on the grounds that they have been disadvantaged before. What affirmative action does, ladies and gentlemen, is it levels the playing field. No, thank you, sir. It levels the playing field on which a meritocracy can actually function. And therefore, ladies and gentlemen, affirmative action is not something that functions in discord with the concept of meritocracy. They function together, ladies and gentlemen. Affirmative action brings us to a situation where we can indeed practice meritocracy in our society. Now let's examine the current situation in the world today. Discrimination, ladies and gentlemen, does exist. In the United States, ladies and gentlemen, in Australia, where the Aborigines are discriminated against, in East Timor, in Tibet, ladies and gentlemen, where the Tibetans face discrimination in terms of their standing against the Chinese. We see these examples of discrimination existing. And what, ladies and gentlemen, we are here to point out is that this discrimination exists despite legislation to supposedly counter it. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let's take a look at what kind of legislation exists. In the US, there is an act known as the Race Discrimination Act, ratified, ladies and gentlemen, in the 1960s. In the following years, 3 landmark civil rights were granted: housing, employment, and the right to vote, regardless of discrimination, no thank you, madam, on the basis of gender or on the basis of race. Now, what we're here today, ladies and gentlemen, to debate is not that this legislation has failed. What we're here to put to you is that this legislation is insufficient. The mere existence of the legislation on paper, ladies and gentlemen, has not been enough. The discrimination that exists in these countries has continued despite the existence of legislation. And what is required to alleviate further the problem of discrimination is indeed affirmative action. Yes, sir.
Is it not the case, though, that affirmative action creates prejudice because people feel that the best people are not getting the jobs?
Sir, again they demonstrate their lack of understanding of the concept of affirmative action. Both of their points of information, ladies and gentlemen, so far seem to center on the fact that affirmative action goes against meritocracy, that it goes against having the best person for the job. But ladies and gentlemen, we are living in an imperfect world. Already, because discrimination exists, ladies and gentlemen, there exists a certain amount of unfair and unjust treatment given to certain groups. What affirmative action does, because it is a deliberate policy, because it is firm, tangible, and concrete action, ladies and gentlemen, what it does is it levels up the playing field. As I've already pointed out, so far they have not demonstrated... No, thank you, madam. No, thank you, sir. They have not demonstrated a clear understanding of the concept of affirmative action. Affirmative action levels up the playing field and allows meritocracy to take place. They seem to assume, ladies and gentlemen, that with affirmative action, with, say, no, thank you, sir, allowing for a black to come in and take a job, and having a quota that a certain number of blacks must be filled in a company, ladies and gentlemen, they assume that these blacks are going to be in any way less qualified than other people for that job. But the point is, ladies and gentlemen, with affirmative action, we pick, no thank you, madam, we pick from a pool of people who have all gone through a system and who are all qualified to undertake that job. The point here is that the playing field has been leveled up. No, thank you, sir. Now let's take a look, ladies and gentlemen, at the concept of women's rights. Women now, ladies and gentlemen, have very similar graduating rates from universities as men. In the United States, 47% of graduates are women, 53% are men. And despite this, ladies and gentlemen, 80% of the US middle management in firms and in companies is made up of males. Now, what do we see? No, thank you, sir. Furthermore, what do we see? No, thank you, madam. Furthermore, what do we see? We see, ladies and gentlemen, a system where median earnings of women who are high school graduates is $18,042. The median earnings of men who are high school dropouts is $20,944. Now, we see a system, ladies and gentlemen, that is patently unjust. A system where legislation exists, we admit, but the legislation is insufficient. What is no, thank you, sir. What is required is a system of action, ladies and gentlemen, of concrete action to take place to ensure that the discrimination is alleviated. These women, ladies and gentlemen, are equally qualified as the men, but the point is they are not reaching the same levels of employment or the same levels of remuneration as their male counterparts. Now, no, thank you, sir. What we're suggesting to you today, ladies and gentlemen, is that affirmative action has put women in these jobs. Having quotas in the system, having quotas that companies are required to fill, is a system by which, ladies and gentlemen, companies are allowed and function in a way that levels up the playing field. We see the same example working in terms of blacks, ladies and gentlemen. Blacks who, because of concrete action that's taking place above the legislation that is already there, are now joining the middle class, who are now securing jobs in government. We see examples of blacks like Sharon Pratt Dixon, the mayor of Washington, D.C., of George Carruthers, the physicist who built the Apollo 16 lunar violet camera, ladies and gentlemen. We see how the playing field has been leveled up. And we see how it reaches out to the masses as well, because of the 47% increase in middle-class employment just for blacks alone. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we are not here today to suggest to you that affirmative action is a perfect solution. What we put to you is that affirmative action has alleviated the problem of discrimination, and it will continue to alleviate this problem if we took this action and if we took this particular course of action, if we indeed supported affirmative action. Thank you.
I now call Vicky Perkins to open the case for the opposition.
Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, this House opposes affirmative action, and we oppose it for 3 reasons. We believe that it goes against the principle of a meritocracy, which I'm going to deal with. We believe that it is insulting both to those who are favoured and to those who are affected negatively by this discrimination. And we believe that it perpetuates prejudice by perpetuating resentment against those who are disfavoured and by being discriminatory against those who are equally qualified for the jobs but just happen to be, for example, the white middle-aged male. We, on the opposition, believe that equality perpetuates equality and that prejudice perpetuates prejudice. Now, I'd like to look, first of all, at some of the things the proposition have put forward. Now, they say they want a conceptual debate. They haven't told us who they want to talk about, just some minority groups. They haven't told us where they want to look at in particular. They want to deal with the issues and the principles. So that's fine. We'll do the same thing. But let's look at some of the things they've said. They've told us how legislation is insufficient on paper. That's a direct quote from the first proposer's speech. Legislation is insufficient on paper. So what exactly does he propose to do? Now, he says we're just talking about the concept, so we're just saying it's a good thing. But you've got to go slightly further. If he's saying that legislation on paper does not work, what is he saying we should do? How is he saying that we should get this ideal that he is talking about? You can't just deal with the concept, which is totally impractical. You have to look at this pragmatically as well as conceptually.
For your information, madam.
Yes.
That's precisely what we have done. We've looked at affirmative action in how it is being practiced today.
Okay, thank you. So you're now contradicting yourself. You're now saying that not only is legislation on paper insufficient, to quote you, but you're now saying that you've looked at it and shown how it's good as well. So it's insufficient and it's good. I think you'll find that's contradictory. Okay, you gave us a few examples of how people have got to the top in countries where there is positive discrimination. But we can give you some examples of where people have got to the top through merit. For example, Margaret Thatcher, the first British female Prime Minister, who achieved her position, no thank you, who achieved her position solely on merit. Now, she would be classed in one of these groups that you talked about who are disadvantaged by government legislation or social prejudices because she is a woman, but she made it to the top on merit. Similarly, so did Benazir Bhutto. She made it to the top on merit. So there are just as many, no thank you, there are just as many examples that we can use of people who've made it to the top on merit in countries which do not practice affirmative action as you can use quoting people like the Mayor of Washington, D.C. Then you gave us your totally flawed argument of how we have equal people in higher education, and in the US say there are only 80% of people in middle management are male. Well, let's look at this. Let's look at the age of the people in middle management. The majority of people in middle management are middle-aged, so we're talking 40s or 50s. These are the people who graduated in the 1960s and 1970s. And I'm afraid that while it may be 50% male, 50% female in the 1990s, it was not in the 1970s. In 1972, approximately 5% of graduates were women. So it is hardly surprising that this generation of people, where 95% of graduates were men, we now see that a higher proportion of men have made it to the top, simply because a higher proportion of men are qualified to make it to the top.
Point of information, ma'am.
Yes.
This is precisely because of the fact that discrimination was practiced such that women would not...
Okay, sit down. Thank you very much. Well, I don't know about other countries, but I know for a fact that in the United Kingdom there is no prejudice on things like A-level grades. There is no prejudice on things like university entrance. Women are getting in on their own merit. Previously, women chose not to enter university, and therefore it is a reflection of this that women are now not at the top when they graduated in the 1960s and 70s. No, thank you. I'd like to continue with our positive case. I'd like to look at the fact that meritocracy is a good thing. Now, you don't seem opposed to meritocracy, but I'd just like to quickly summarise why it's a good thing, because I believe that if we can prove the first premise that meritocracy is good, and the second premise that your system goes against the meritocracy, then we have to then reach the logical conclusion that your system is bad. So, why is a meritocracy good? Because it is good ethically. It is right to give the best people jobs. It is right that someone should be rewarded for their talent, for their hard work, not because of the colour of their skin, not because of their sex, not because of their religious preference, etc., etc. No, thank you. So that is the ethical reason why a meritocracy is good. The social reason why a meritocracy is good. Because if we have the best people becoming doctors, we have the best doctors and better healthcare. If we have the best people becoming teachers, no thank you, we have the best teachers and the best education system, and so it goes on. And thirdly, a meritocracy is good economically, because we get increased productivity, we get better industries, we get a better economy in the country as a whole, we get higher taxes coming into the country, which can then go out onto the people, etc., etc. So, first premise proved, a meritocracy is good. So secondly, let's see how your system goes against meritocracy. Well, I'll tell you exactly how it goes against meritocracy, because it's very simple. You're not awarding people on the basis of merit. Now, you seem to claim that you're going to award people on the basis of merit because there are just as many people from minority groups who have the same talents as the people who are not from minority groups. Okay, we accept that. We're not saying that people from minority groups are incapable. We agree that there are people who are black, that there are people who are female, that there are people who are Jewish, etc., who are just as capable as the white middle-aged male. But we believe that these people should be allowed to get to the top on merit. And we believe that those who are good should get to the top on merit, not on preference. No, thank you. And you seem to believe that basically we can level out the playing field, to quote the first proposition, by saying that let's get all the good people in, and let's allow the people who were previously the victims of prejudicial treatment, let's have them on the same level, and then we'll judge. So you're still prejudicing against it. You're either saying that we should get them all in and then judge them all equally, in which case you're not going for affirmative action, or you're prejudicing against merit by somehow putting them one rung up the ladder by getting them in there in the first place. No, thank you. It's one or the other. Either you're prejudicing for them to get them up onto the same level which they wouldn't have been on solely on merit, or you're saying you're not going to use affirmative action by treating everyone on merit. So you're either contradicting yourself or you're talking nonsense. No, thank you. So, I've shown how your system goes totally against the system of a meritocracy, and I've shown how a meritocracy is good. The logical conclusion is that if something goes against something that is good, then it has to be bad. So, we've proven that your system is bad. Your system perpetuates inefficient people at the top. It perpetuates a society where we do not have the best people in professions. Therefore, we do not have the best legal system. We do not have the best education system. We do not have the best healthcare. It goes against the ethical principle of rewarding people based on their talents. And it is economically damaging to have inefficient people running our industries, to have inefficient people running our companies, and to have inefficient people running our country. This has to be a bad thing, and it is definitely against the meritocracy to take into account anything other than talent, to take into account the colour of a person's skin, to take into account whether a person is male or female. This is against meritocracy because, ladies and gentlemen, the very definition of meritocracy is merit, rewarding on merit. And that is what we believe. We believe that people should be rewarded on merit. We believe that this is the best system, the most successful system, the fairest system. And we believe that people from disadvantaged groups can make it to the top, as the examples I have shown have proved. Michael is going to go on to show how it is insulting to people to favour them according to the colour of their skin as opposed to by merit, and how it perpetuates prejudice, because we believe that by treating people equally we will eventually get equality in all professions. We believe that equality perpetuates equality and prejudice perpetuates prejudice. Ladies and gentlemen, I beg to oppose.
I now call upon Selina Chua to continue the case for the proposition.
gentlemen, let's consider what that side of the House has done first before I go on to proceed with my side of the House's case. Ladies and gentlemen, what has the first negative come up and told us today? She has gone on the assumption that affirmative action is... The assumption that she has gone on with affirmative action is quite extreme, ladies and gentlemen. She assumes that all these people that we take to practice affirmative action with are completely unqualified. She assumes, ladies and gentlemen, that all these people are inferior and come from a lower standing. Why is this so? Ladies and gentlemen, she has set up this contention of meritocracy. She has immediately assumed that affirmative action is a concept from which meritocracy is completely exclusive. But ladies and gentlemen, why is this the case? She has gone on the premise and the belief and the preconception, ladies and gentlemen, that the disadvantaged are from a group by which they are not as qualified and we pick the worst from the barrel. Ladies and gentlemen, this is simply not the case. What you get with affirmative action is a situation where you pick the appropriate people and you put them in the appropriate schools or the appropriate jobs. This, ladies and gentlemen, is facilitated by the fact that they have the proper qualifications for what job you put them in. You are not going to take... No, thank you, madam. You are not going to take somebody who is qualified as a laborer to be put in this position of a CEO, for example. Instead, ladies and gentlemen, you are taking two people who are on the same standing of perhaps different race or religion and choosing the one who is in a disadvantaged position. For example, the minority who is discriminated against. Therefore, ladies and gentlemen, you are still practicing meritocracy. You are still taking the person on the basis of merit because both are equally good. No, thank you, madam. It is just that you are taking the one which is disadvantaged because you want to give him an equal footing to level out the playing field. Ladies and gentlemen, they automatically assume, perhaps, that this leveling out of the playing field cannot take place because they say equality would equal to equality. But how is this equality brought about, I ask you? Ladies and gentlemen, we purport to you that the solution to this equality is affirmative action. Because what are you doing here? You have a disadvantaged group here and a majority group here with one dominating over society. The other minority group do not get the same equal opportunities as the group which is dominating. Therefore, ladies and gentlemen, what happens with affirmative action? Affirmative action takes place and gives rise to a situation where the disadvantaged group has the same equal opportunities, and you can practice meritocracy there too. Yes, please.
No, it doesn't. It gives the disadvantaged group dominance over...
No, sir, it does not. You automatically assume that you are taking an extreme situation where, supposing in the minority group, you are taking all of the minority group to replace a subsection of the majority group. But ladies and gentlemen, this is not the case. What you are taking is the best of the minority group and putting them into positions where they can work. Ladies and gentlemen, you are trying to establish a situation and a circumstance of equality where all minority groups and majority groups both have equal opportunities, ladies and gentlemen. She has outlined the meritocracy argument and told you that ethically it's wrong because people who do the best should be rewarded for it. But, no, thank you, madam. But the point is, ladies and gentlemen, as I've illustrated before, affirmative action can take place with the meritocracy system incorporated in that. Economics, she tells you, it is because economically we would practice meritocracy and affirmative action does not count in this. But ladies and gentlemen, in the economic sense, you are discriminating against the minority group and they might have the economic potential that you are neglecting. Therefore, what are you talking about then? Ladies and gentlemen, that's at a... No, thank you, sir, I'm sorry. Ladies and gentlemen, that side of the House's first negative speaker has failed to engage my side of the House's speaker. He has set forth to you today that the practice of affirmative action would result in the equality for the disadvantaged group. For example, ladies and gentlemen, people who are discriminated on the basis of race, color, or religion. Ladies and gentlemen, they have not been able to dispute the fact that affirmative action will give rise to this. Now, ladies and gentlemen, as the second speaker, I will deal with how affirmative action affects the rest of society, dealing with the problems resulting from discrimination. What are the problems of discrimination, ladies and gentlemen? Let's go through one by one. Number one, it creates a situation of instability within society. Why is this so? This is because of the fact that you have gaps and divisions caused by things such as race and color or culture. And this can result in a destabilization of society because of the resentment which is brought about by this. For example... No, thank you, sir. No, thank you, madam. For example, the LA race riots gave rise to the frustrations which people felt because the blacks felt that they were being discriminated against. No, thank you, sir. Therefore, ladies and gentlemen, this not getting the equal chance or the equal opportunity caused by discrimination will be combated by affirmative action. Secondly, ladies and gentlemen, let's deal with how it causes society to be stuck in a rut. Ladies and gentlemen, without affirmative action, you have discrimination. Discrimination would result in a small group of people being disadvantaged above the rest. And ladies and gentlemen, what does this result in? This results in them not being able to get the same jobs. This results in not being able to get the same kind of education. Therefore, there is a part of the society which is lagging behind because they do not have the same qualifications. They do not have the same opportunities. And therefore, when you're trying to progress, there's one which is always dragging you down because that group does not have the opportunities or the income. Please, madam.
What is wrong with giving people equal education and equal opportunities? That is what we are proposing, but that is different to affirmative action.
Madam, what is the aim of affirmative action? Affirmative action is to achieve a state of equality, giving everybody equal opportunity. Therefore, we are telling you, and we are agreeing with you on this point, that equality would equate to equality, and therefore we would support affirmative action. No, thank you, sir. Now, ladies and gentlemen, therefore your society would be stuck there for a moment because of the fact that there is a part of your society, the minority group, which does not get the same equal opportunities, and therefore it is difficult for you to progress efficiently and at the same rate. Ladies and gentlemen, how does affirmative action solve these problems? Very simply, let's take a look at the instability in society. Affirmative action, when implemented, will give rise to an equal opportunity situation. Therefore, there is no cause for resentment against the other minority groups. Ladies and gentlemen, you get a situation where the implementation of this causes the fact that everybody has an equal opportunity. You give them equal chance to jobs, equal chance to skills. For example, ladies and gentlemen, the black Hispanics in America have a high unemployment rate of 37.2%. But if you gave them an equal, and what results in this is the fact that you have a situation where they have resentment because of the fact, no thank you madam, they are resenting the larger class of white majority people, and therefore this gives rise to a social unrest and instability. But when you implement affirmative action and you give them the equal opportunity, you take away this source of resentment and you create a society which works much better in result. Secondly, ladies and gentlemen, let's talk about the fact that you hold back society. When you implement affirmative action, because you are giving everybody the equal opportunity, you are giving the minority group the ability to get jobs, to get to education. Therefore, ladies and gentlemen, what results? You get a larger, more even pool of people by which you can progress more faster and more efficiently because you give them all the same kind of equal opportunity and you allow themselves the knowledge to improve. Therefore, your society is not held back by a small class of people who are discriminated against, and your society does not suffer the instability that comes about because of the act of discrimination. Ladies and gentlemen, what have we shown you today? My first speaker has set up the contention that discrimination exists in our world today. Furthermore, he has shown to you why we will want to get rid of discrimination and how affirmative action would effectively negate this. Secondly, ladies and gentlemen, I have proven to you that the problems of discrimination would be alleviated or solved by the implementation of affirmative action, and therefore, because it is effective and beneficial, this House supports affirmative action.
I now call Michael Bershon to continue the case for the opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, honourable adjudicators, members of this House. Before we begin to continue our constructive case, let's look firstly at some of the things that the opposition have said. Now, one of the key points is that we need affirmative action because people are still being discriminated against. And we have the example of 80% of people in middle management are male. Now, my first speaker has already dealt with this, so let's just look at it quickly because they insisted upon reiterating this problem and asserting again that affirmative action is needed to stop inequality. Well, the fact is that when the people in middle management now were in university, there were far, far more men in university, far, far more men becoming qualified. And so they came out of university qualified and they went into the jobs and they climbed up the ladder because of meritocracy, because they were qualified. Now we have 50% of females in coming out of education, along with the 50% of males. It may be 47, maybe 53. It all boils down to about half and half coming out. So in the time it takes for these people to get to middle management, we will be seeing in the future 50% of females in middle management, 50% of males. It's an age thing. Equality laws were implemented a while ago. They take time to come into action. They are now coming into action. No, thank you, sir. Now, the next point is that they have said that affirmative action does not go against the concept of meritocracy. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this is unfortunately wrong, because affirmative action, by definition, means taking a group or a person above another person by taking things other than merit into account. If you take skin colour into account, if you take sex into account, if you take the kind of crappy tie they're wearing into account, then you are, in fact, discriminating on something other than merit. So, no thank you, sir. So, affirmative action and meritocracy are, in fact, contradictory. Now, we've had from the second speaker for the proposition that they're not going to take a labourer and put him in a CEO's position. Well, yes, I'd hope they wouldn't, because that would just be very silly. But what they're saying is they're going to take the best of the minority groups and put them in positions. Well, this, as I'm going to show, is insulting and creates prejudice. I mean, the best of the minority groups do not, thankfully, need your help to get to positions, because they're in fact the best. They stand above the crowd. Let's look at Margaret Thatcher. Let's look at Benazir Bhutto. If you want more examples, let's look at Marie Curie. All people who got to the top without affirmative action. Yes, please.
The main assumption here is that discrimination no longer exists, but so, as my first and second speaker have shown you, discrimination still exists, and you cannot assume meritocracy is already in motion, sir.
No, but affirmative action is just a form of reverse discrimination. It doesn't work that. If you're going to insult people, you're going to, as I'm going to show, you are in fact no longer giving the best people the jobs. You're saying you're not good enough to get a job. We're going to give you one because we think you're stupid. We're going to put laws in place, no thank you, sir, to give you a job. It may not be as extreme as that, but that is how it is perceived, ladies and gentlemen. We have the example of the LA race riots. Well, the LA race riots were based on the rather unfortunate battering of Rodney King. It's not to do with affirmative action. No thank you, if policemen go and batter someone about, then it's got nothing to do with affirmative action. No thank you, madam, taking the best of minority groups, the best of minority groups do not need your help. The problem lies with the less qualified and less competent in disadvantaged groups. You need to solve that problem rather than helping people who can get to the top on their own. Now, my colleague, Ms. Perkins, has already, no thank you, sir, has already shown us how affirmative action goes against the principle of a meritocracy and how affirmative action is, in fact, bad for the economy. I'm going to look at how affirmative action is insulting both to the people discriminated in favour of and to the people discriminated against, and I'm also going to show you how affirmative action creates prejudice, which the proposition have poo-pooed, but which is in fact right. Now let's look at the insulting argument. It is insulting, ladies and gentlemen, to people who are discriminated in favour of. You're actually saying to them, you will never know whether you are the best person for the job. You will never know that because we have laws in place that insist that we give enough jobs to women, that insist that we give enough jobs to disadvantaged people, that insist, no thank you sir, that insist that we give enough jobs to people who we think need our help when they don't. You never will know whether you're the best person for the job or whether something else came into play. No thank you sir. And that is insulting. That reduces one's self-esteem. Affirmative action suggests that something irrelevant played a role in job selection. It suggests that your skin is the right colour, so you got a job. I mean, let's look at some examples. No, thank you, madam. In California, they have voted against affirmative action because they do not think it is good. It is insulting. It creates prejudice. The Supreme Court, when it discussed affirmative action, ladies and gentlemen, came out against it. And ironically enough, the casting vote was given by a black judge who said, no, I don't want affirmative action. It's insulting. It creates prejudice. Martin Luther King, I have a dream that my children will be judged on the content of their character, not the colour of the skin. You are in fact, no thank you, you are in fact bringing the colour of their skin into the debate. We would have it completely out of the debate. Now, it is unfair to people discriminated against. If you were the best person for the job and you didn't get it, you will feel insulted. It's like your skin is the wrong colour. That's just reverse racism if you happen to be white. You're the wrong sex. Reverse sexism if you happen to be male. It's absurd to say this. It is absurd to say that just because the white male has been on top for so long, then we've got to subjugate him just because it makes us feel better. That is not fair. Now, why does it create prejudice? Ladies and gentlemen, we raised this in a point of information. They poo-pooed it. But it creates prejudice because society feels that people got the job on something other than merit. This world, unfortunately, has enough bigoted fools to go, the foreigners are all taking our jobs, that we do not at all want to give them ammunition to say the foreigners are taking their jobs because when they don't even deserve them. Why give bigoted fools ammunition to insult a meritocracy? This does not work. You do not want to create a situation where you are trying to alleviate prejudice, but in fact what you're doing is creating it. That, unfortunately, is not fair. Ladies and gentlemen, equality perpetuates equality, prejudice perpetuates prejudice. We've shown how affirmative action does not equal meritocracy. We've shown how meritocracy is good for the economy, affirmative action is not. We have also shown how affirmative action is insulting and creates prejudice, the very thing they're trying to solve. Therefore, I beg to oppose.
I call Vernie Oliveira to continue the case for the proposition.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Now, in my speech, ladies and gentlemen, what I will be doing is summing up my side of the House's case and then going on to rebut theirs. Now, my side of the House, ladies and gentlemen, has shown to you the current world condition, and that involves discrimination, ladies and gentlemen, a fact that that side of the House has refused to acknowledge discrimination exists today, and that we show you, ladies and gentlemen, that affirmative action is a viable solution to the problems of discrimination. My second speaker has also gone on to show you that affirmative action has benefits to society, and that because affirmative action is finally effective and beneficial, that we should support it. Now, the negative, ladies, today, the negative today has come up with 3 prongs to the case. 1, that it goes against meritocracy. 2, that it is insulting. And number 3, that it is prejudicial. And I will go on to rebut each and every one of these themes, ladies and gentlemen, and show you why their case cannot stand. Now, on the issue of meritocracy, ladies and gentlemen, they assume that there are wide differences between the minorities and the majorities. But ladies and gentlemen, we never said that we were going to compare a high school dropout with a valedictorian, because that's pretty absurd. One moment, madam. Ladies and gentlemen, the very fact is, with the idea of meritocracy, it is affirmative action that will help pursue meritocracy. You cannot assume, ladies and gentlemen, that today we already have that today we already have a world of equality. Rather, ladies and gentlemen, we show you, and we have shown you once again, that we don't have meritocracy, and that it's affirmative action that will help you achieve it. Yes, madam.
Meritocracy means rewarding on merit only. Affirmative action means taking into account something else.
Right, madam. Yes, madam. But you cannot compare, ladies and gentlemen, a black youth from Harlem and somebody who vacations in Bermuda every year. The fact is, ladies and gentlemen, you cannot have 2 people who may have 6.5 grade point averages, but who come from different backgrounds. The fact is, you cannot assume meritocracy when there is no meritocracy, ladies and gentlemen, and it's affirmative action that will give you this. Now, ladies and gentlemen, they also bring up the fact that they also say that meritocracy cannot exist with affirmative action because in principle it does not support it. But ladies and gentlemen, we tell you that it does, precisely because it supports affirmative action, precisely because it supports the idea of equality. And we bring up to you examples like the Maoris in New Zealand and the Aborigines in Australia, the American Indians in America, the Hispanics, the blacks, and the Burakumin in Japan. You cannot tell us, ladies and gentlemen, that these social groups do not exist. For example, ladies and gentlemen, the Burakumin in Japan are not allowed to take on higher level jobs. They are limited to jobs like shoe shining, like janitorial duties, no sir, and to cleaning out the garbage on the streets. Now, ladies and gentlemen, when these discrepancies exist in society, you cannot tell us that we cannot have affirmative action. Rather, ladies and gentlemen, we tell you that we must have affirmative action to even out the differences. No, madam. Ladies and gentlemen, if Japan were an even society, we wouldn't have social and income discrepancies that we see today. Rather, therefore, ladies and gentlemen, we see that we must have affirmative action. Now, going on, ladies and gentlemen, the first speaker brought out examples of Margaret Thatcher and said, well, she was an example of someone who succeeded because she didn't have affirmative action. Rather, number one, ladies and gentlemen, Margaret Thatcher was actually advantaged by the fact that she was a white woman, and number two, by the fact that her father was already politically active and he was already an active member of politics in the United Kingdom. Number two, ladies and gentlemen, the existence of the alternatives, one moment sir, the existence of the alternatives does not rule out the fact that there are people out there who need affirmative action, people like Colin Powell, people like Ron Brown, and people like Rudolph Giuliani, who did use affirmative action and did go on to take on active roles in society. Yes, sir.
Margaret Thatcher actually said that she had to be twice as good as any man to get the job. She seems
yes, sir. The very fact that she's a woman does count in her favor that she is a minority, but the fact remains that she was white and her father was politically active. This counts as an advantage to her situation. Now we go on to the point about that it is insulting and that it is prejudicial. Now, ladies and gentlemen, it is not insulting when you're trying to help someone who is disadvantaged. Now, once again, we iterate that the negative has assumed that we do not disadvantage and we do not discriminate against people who are different from us. The fact is these things exist. He said, ladies and gentlemen, that the LA riots don't prove affirmative action, but the fact is the LA riots do prove social conditions that exist today because of discrimination. The LA riots prove it, ladies and gentlemen. Anti-Semitism in the Midwest prove it. The arsons of black churches prove it. Ladies and gentlemen, these examples show no, sir. These examples show that discrimination does exist today, and you cannot say, ladies and gentlemen, that it is insulting to help someone come out of that grid. Once again, we bring you to the examples of Black Harlem City, where people live amidst crime, where people live amidst broken families and poverty. Ladies and gentlemen, we see today that because there are these discrepancies in society, no matter, we need affirmative action to push these levels up, to even it off, in order to ensure a meritocracy. Now, ladies and gentlemen, furthermore, they bring up the example of California, and that California rejected it because they didn't want affirmative action. But ladies and gentlemen, we would suggest to you that the reason number one why California rejected it was because of racism itself. They were afraid, and Californians are afraid of the mass migration of Hispanics from South America. The very fact is, ladies and gentlemen, California is set to become one of the states in America where non-whites actually replace them as the majority. And the fact is, Californians are afraid of this phenomena. Californians are afraid of the changing face of their cities when we see whole cities becoming Hispanic. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a phobia, and this as in itself shows racism and discrimination. And once again, we see the need for affirmative action to support social programs. One moment, sir. We need to see affirmative action to support these people and to tell people, wait a minute and hold on, these phobias are unfounded and you need to level off society. Yes, sir.
So why create much more prejudice when people look at affirmative action
Sir,
and say, this
fine,
is
sir.
not
I will now go on to deal with your prejudice point. Now, ladies and gentlemen, how does prejudice come about? Prejudice comes about because of stereotypes. Prejudice comes about because people see something and think, oh, because you're black, oh, because you're woman, because you're Hispanic or Asian, therefore you must be this way. You must be smart, you must be weak, you must be stupid, you must be poor. But ladies and gentlemen, the fact is, prejudice exists today, again, once again, because of the discrimination that exists in society. Prejudice exists today because there is no affirmative action, because society has not been leveled off. And once again, ladies and gentlemen, we bring to you the point that affirmative action does exactly this. No, sir. Affirmative action levels off society to remove prejudices, to give people no reason to say, I think you're black, and therefore I think you're going to kill me. I think you're Hispanic, and therefore I think you're going to rob me. Affirmative action gives you the support. Affirmative action levels off the society and removes any excuse why any person would actually say, I'm looking at you and I'm thinking you are like this because of my stereotype. And therefore, ladies and gentlemen, at the end of the affirmative substantive speeches, we have shown you that because the negative has failed to understand that discrimination exists today, that prejudice exists because of social discrepancies, and that discrimination exists to unlevel off society, that we need affirmative action to destroy prejudice. We need affirmative action to destroy this so-called phobia, and we need this affirmative action to destroy all these discrepancies in society. And therefore, once again, because affirmative action is effective and beneficial, because affirmative action comes after the failures of the civil rights laws that have failed to destroy discrimination, therefore the motion definitely must stand. Thank you very much.
I now call upon James Williams to continue the case for the opposition.
Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen of the House, honoured adjudicators, it's now my role in this debate to look at everything that they have said and to show you why we have won the debate. And I intend to do this in their two main thematic areas. That is to say that it is effective and that it is beneficial. And we disagree, quite frankly, on both of these counts. But first of all, may I just point out a slight contradiction in the opposition's case today. She seems to be now saying that we're going to have affirmative action for people from deprived backgrounds, perhaps affirmative action depending on how much your father knows about politics, when at first the idea was, by their definition of the motion, that it was those disadvantaged by government legislation or social prejudice. Perhaps you could sort out what affirmative action actually is and to whom it applies. Now, on this side of the House, we believe that equality perpetuates equality and that prejudice perpetuates prejudice, and we have shown that throughout the debate. The first major clash that we had was their assertion that affirmative action was able to coexist with meritocracy. Now, we have said time after time that meritocracy means that you judge people purely on merit and on nothing else. And they say, no, we're going to judge people on merit as well, but we're just going to bring in another element. Meritocracy, judged on merit, I think we'll leave it to you to decide that, ladies and gentlemen. But if there is going to be, no, thank you, sir, if there is going to be another factor other than merit which helps you to get a job or to lose a job, no, thank you, that is not a meritocracy, and the two systems cannot coexist. Now, in the first section, we talked about that it was effective. Now, the basic argument was it was effective because it wasn't against meritocracy and it levelled up the playing field. Now, to start off putting this case forward, you said that there were many examples of inequalities. You said that there were many social equalities and gave us some examples. Now, we quite clearly showed you that A, we agree that society is unequal, we really disagree on how we are actually going to solve the problem, and secondly, that the particular example that you looked at showed us only the policies in place when middle management men, who are now roving on towards their 50s, were going to university. And we have shown you that society is stuck in a rut in that respect. Give education time, give equality time, because equality will perpetuate equality. We agree that there are inequalities in society, that black people are discriminated against, that women, no thank you, are discriminated against, that people with vomity ties are discriminated against, and that people with floppy fringes are discriminated against in our society, quite frankly. But, ladies and gentlemen, we disagree on how we are going to solve these problems. Your main argument was this: it levels up the playing field, it makes society equal, it makes society fair, and yet you have not been able to adequately rebut the fact that affirmative action creates prejudice. It gives ammunition to the bigoted idiots of society, and that is a quite well-known fact. Because if you can see that people are getting jobs because they are of a certain group, you do not merely hate that group because you think they're taking your jobs anyway, you hate that group because they're taking their jobs because they are of that group and they are being given preferential treatment. It creates prejudice, and as you said yourself, the only way to get rid of inequality is to get rid of prejudicial attitudes in society. Yes, please, sir.
Precisely, sir. what affirmative action does is it counters the problem of prejudice. It alleviates the problem. You fail to understand this problem, Mr. Speaker.
We have quite clearly shown you that it creates prejudice. Could you not understand the idea that perhaps when someone sees that people are getting jobs because of a certain background or because of a certain skin colour, they will see that there is an injustice? We have shown how it will give ammunition to people who are against previously discriminated against groups in society. You have not, no thank you, by any means produced any convincing evidence that it will actually combat prejudicial activities. Now, you went on to some examples about the USA. You talked about the race riots. Now, USA, you said, was one example of a country which had an affirmative action policy. And then you went on to use the example of race rioting. Now, we are of the opinion that affirmative action, quite honestly, does not work. And we believe that this example shows that it does not work on our side of the House. No, thank you. We believe that in every occasion where affirmative action has been put in place, it has produced resentment, and it has produced inequality, and it has produced tension. That is the case before us today. No, thank you. You went on then to say that it was beneficial, and whereas your effective argument was that it didn't work against meritocracy and that it levelled the playing field, your beneficial argument, on the other hand, seemed to boil down to the fact that it didn't work against meritocracy and that it levelled the playing field. So let's look at that in a little bit more detail. That's what you started off with. It does level the playing field, and it is meritocratic. But yet we have shown you that people will never know whether they were the best person for the job, or whether they were simply selected on the grounds of their race, their sex, their age. We will never know. That will produce resentment from both sides of society, and it will produce overall resentment from those people who will be given ammunition by this unfair policy. No, thank you. In your beneficial argument, you went on to look at how it supposedly affects the rest of society, and you actually used the phrase, inequality creates resentment, and we completely agree with this. That is what we are trying to show to you on this side of the House, ladies and gentlemen. The equality we have at the moment indeed creates resentment, but a legislated inequality will create more prejudice. Prejudice will perpetuate prejudice where equality will perpetuate equality. Yes, please, sir.
Affirmative action counters this inequality.
Affirmative action does not counter this inequality, because although on this side of the House they are saying, well, it doesn't matter, it's not unmeritocratic because we'll take the best people from disadvantaged groups. Well, if they're the best, ladies and gentlemen, we quite frankly don't believe that they're going to have any problem in getting the jobs anyway and don't need to be patronised by this help. And secondly, if they are the best, then we feel that they should be given the jobs. However, the question is where they are not the best and where people who are less good than them are getting in on the basis of their sex, their age, whatever. And we have agreed that this is a universal policy. It is an argument on principle, no thank you, and it does not matter on what we are discriminating. This is a principle, and we have shown you our principle. We have shown you how we believe it will affect people's attitudes in society, and you have not adequately rebutted it. In your third speech, your rebuttal speech, you then went on to fail to rebut the fact that it will create prejudice. And even now, in their points of information, they're standing up and saying, but it doesn't create prejudice, but it stops prejudice. And we have shown you how it plausibly creates prejudice. Perhaps you might like to attempt to rebut that argument, because it is a very serious issue we're looking at, ladies and gentlemen. We agree on this side of the House, the only way to combat inequality will be to alter attitudes, and you will be affecting attitudes in a detrimental way by enforcing a policy of affirmative action. They went on to stress again they would choose the best of minority groups. And again, we say that that is not adequate, because if they are the best, they should get in anyway. If they have merit, they will get in a meritocracy. A meritocracy means we judge solely on merit. This is the case before you today, whether we should judge solely on merit or not. We believe to give education to society. We believe in a system of equality where education is the main function, because you mustn't look at middle management men today, ladies and gentlemen. They're all, quite frankly, decaying in their seats. We need to look at the young. We need to look at what we can do. We need to give equality time. We need to give education time, ladies and gentlemen, because equality will beget equality, whereas prejudice will perpetuate prejudice. I beg to oppose.
I call upon Vicky Perkins to conclude the case for the opposition.
Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, let's first of all look at the issues that we agree upon. We all seem to agree that a meritocracy is good. The opposition haven't challenged that. We agree that equality is good. We agree that equal opportunity, equal education is good. And, surprisingly, they have conceded that legislation is insufficient on paper, and they haven't given us a practical way of enforcing their affirmative action. And they then went on to concede that inequality creates resentment. So, they want to do something which is going to create resentment. This brings me on to our clashes. The main point here seems to be prejudice. No one wants prejudice, and we feel that affirmative action is going to create prejudice. And they actually said themselves it's going to create resentment. And surely it's logical to go on to say that if someone resents someone, they become prejudiced towards those sort of people. For example, the white middle-aged male, very qualified, going for a job, finds himself being discriminated against in favour for the black female, is going to feel prejudiced against them. To quote the opposition, it will create resentment. And we also feel that this is insulting to these people. You haven't really dealt with that argument adequately, but we believe that people do not want to be chosen on the basis of their colour of their skin. We've quoted Martin Luther King to you. We've given you a very recent example of California, in which a black judge voted against affirmative action. Why? Because people don't want to be chosen because they're black. They don't want to be chosen because they're female. They want to be chosen because they're the best person for their job. It's insulting to them to suggest that they need affirmative action. Yes, okay, you can give us some examples of how we do not have equality, but I believe that most people want to obtain their positions through merit, not through affirmative action. And another example of your prejudices, you seem to think that it's unjust to have the white middle-aged males dominating our job market. However, you seem quite happy to allow the black females to have affirmative action, which, if it is carried on in the way that you're suggesting, will create a job market dominated by the black females. So, what do you want? Do you want equality or not? Because affirmative action is not equality. In England, we refer to this as positive discrimination, and that is the word for this. It is discrimination. You're just moving discrimination from one group to another. You are creating prejudice. And just to look briefly at the meritocracy arguments, they said meritocracy is good, so do we. Unfortunately, we understand what meritocracy is. We understand that meritocracy is selecting people on the basis of merit, and they seem to think that meritocracy is taking into account merit and taking into account what sort of minority group someone's come from. Well, I'm sorry, you've got your definitions there wrong. Meritocracy, judging by merit, affirmative action, taking into account other factors. The two are not the same. The two are not compatible. We've shown you that meritocracy is good. We've shown you that your system does not support meritocracy, therefore it follows that your system is bad. We've shown you how it's insulting to people. It's insulting to those who are selected merely on the basis of the colour of their skin, etc. We have shown you how it's also insulting to those who are passed over when they are very well qualified for the job. We have shown you that this insult then creates prejudice. In your words, creates resentment. You tried to tell us that it was effective and beneficial. I'm sorry, those are actually the same thing, effective and beneficial, in the way you dealt with it. So let's look at them as one thing in the way that you did. It is neither effective nor is it beneficial. It helps to get people to the top who would not necessarily get there on merit. It helps to create resentment, and it creates prejudice. Surely this is not effective. Surely this is not beneficial. Ladies and gentlemen, we support equality. We support equal opportunity. But we do not believe that their system advocates equality. We believe that their system advocates prejudice. We believe it is positive discrimination. Discrimination against one group as opposed to another group. And any type of discrimination is bad. Equality perpetuates equality. That is what we want to do. Prejudice perpetuates prejudice. Ladies and gentlemen, I beg to oppose.
I call Selena Chua to conclude the case for the proposition.
Right, ladies and gentlemen, it's that time where we assess what has gone on both sides of the House, both from the proposition as well as the negative. Let's first deal with it from the negative side of the House. Ladies and gentlemen, there is the whole issue of meritocracy and how an affirmative action, a concept and system of affirmative action, will exclude meritocracy from the whole thing. But ladies and gentlemen, let us put forth the contention as we have put forth in my first speaker, myself, and my third speaker. You can only have a system of meritocracy when equal opportunity is established because of the fact that you can't judge somebody on merit if he can't be judged because he's discriminated against and he's not given the opportunity to be judged. Therefore, ladies and gentlemen, what is this whole issue about meritocracy being completely separate and exclusive from affirmative action? Simply put, ladies and gentlemen, that's not a true assertion. And that is what we have heard from that side of the House today, ladies and gentlemen. They have given us a lot of assertion. They have told us that it is insulting to have affirmative action. Why then, ladies and gentlemen, would we have affirmative action? Ladies and gentlemen, they have told us that the cream of the crop can get there by themselves. They don't need affirmative action. But what examples have they given us to support this? Minority examples, ladies and gentlemen. Margaret Thatcher, Benazir Bhutto, they are the cream of the crop right at the top of very select positions. Ladies and gentlemen, where is the majority of proof here? Not all of us are Margaret Thatcher, I'm sorry, not all of us are Benazir Bhuttos. Instead, ladies and gentlemen, what we need to be proved here is a majority of examples proving that the cream of the crop, even when discriminated against on the basis of age, race, or religion, can get there by themselves. But, ladies and gentlemen, we have proved that without the affirmative action, you will have discrimination. They have said that it is insulting because you do not help them on the basis of merit. Well, ladies and gentlemen, you can't possibly help them on the basis of merit because they are not judged on the basis of merit. They are judged on their skin color. They are judged by discrimination. Therefore, we advise implementing affirmative action because it removes this discrimination. It removes the barrier which would create equality. And therefore, ladies and gentlemen, we would advocate and support affirmative action because then you can have this so-called system of meritocracy they talk about. Because then, ladies and gentlemen, you can have leveling out of the playing field and equal opportunity. Lastly, ladies and gentlemen, they talk about this catchphrase they keep throwing at you. Equality, they tell you, perpetuates equality. Prejudice perpetuates prejudice. Very catchy, you can sell it to Coke perhaps. But ladies and gentlemen, the point of the matter is, we agree that equality perpetuates equality, but equality can only be gained not through discrimination, but through the implementation of affirmative action which would remove discrimination from the equation. Therefore, ladies and gentlemen, we need to support affirmative action. Ladies and gentlemen, that is for that side of the House. What has my side of the House done? The proposition. We have told you that discrimination exists in the world today, and they have agreed with us on that point. We've also showed you why, ladies and gentlemen, it is not acceptable. They've told us that we would not deal with we won't deal with discrimination using affirmative action. How else then, ladies and gentlemen? We have shown you affirmative action works. We have shown you it removes the barrier of discrimination and allowing for equal opportunity and equality. Therefore, we would support it. My first speaker has set that out for you, as well as the fact that it will help the group which is being disadvantaged. Furthermore, ladies and gentlemen, as a second level of contention, we have set out for you the problems caused by discrimination in our society today. We have also told you that these problems such as instability in society, problems such as allowing your society to progress more effectively, a point which they have not been able to deal with, will be alleviated by the implementation of affirmative action. Ladies and gentlemen, they have told us today that it is neither effective nor beneficial, but have they been able to prove us why? Have they been able to prove that affirmative action does not achieve the aims of removing discrimination? No, ladies and gentlemen, they have not. They have based their case on assertion and assumption without any examples to prove a majority. On the other hand, my side of the House, the proposition, has set forth to you a reasonable contention that is effective and beneficial, and therefore we would support, or we do support, affirmative action. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is now time for the judges to make their decision. The judges make this independently and hand their individual result sheets to me. They then go outside to discuss any comments they want to make, and one will announce the decision on behalf of the panel and make any comments. Thank you if everyone could take their seats, please. I now wish to welcome Sebastian Percival from Argentina to announce the decision and to make comments on behalf of the panel.
Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, and debating teams, maybe I was given the task because I'm not wearing an ugly tie, nor do I have a floppy fringe. So, I'd like to announce that the judges felt that the debate today was one that had a number of assertions, and we felt that a lot of them were false assertions. A number of the judges outside were saying, I've heard too many rather empty statements, and I've been hearing these statements, they say, for a number of my debating days. So we're a bit disappointed, I suppose, and you're not supposed to give negative criticism, even at this late stage, on the content, if you like. But we were very, very impressed at the energy level. My hands are sweaty, my pen is empty, and I was thoroughly exhausted when I walked outside. A number of us had a 1-point margin. I myself had a 0.5 margin. And that, I think, is a credit to the energy level, the clash, the spot of the arguments, even if the arguments were rather empty, and then going for them. I felt that when I was at the end of my adjudication, as a lot of the other judges said, we were exhausted. So we do felt that two ideas were presented, and they were argued about, and there was a clash. So they should be congratulated on their level of clash. I've been instructed that the decision must be quick. It was a 4-3 split. That's how close it is. They are disappointing splits, I know. I would just announce that we gave today's semi-final debate to the opposition to England 4-3.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for attending and congratulations to both teams. I now declare this debate closed. And just before everyone leaves, I'd just like to say what a great honor it's been for myself and for Michael Pierman to come back. We were members of the first Bermuda debate team to enter the World Schools Debate Championships when it was in Scotland. And had it not been for the hard work of Elizabeth Virgo, and also for the late Victoria Cox, among many others, none of this would have happened. So congratulations to them. Thank you very much.
Before everybody peels out of the room, can I just say that you different judges? Could I tell everybody we're going to go really